This woman actually fined me $2,000 for swimming in the lake I've owned for 15 years. I'm standing waist deep in crystal clear water, the sweet scent of honeysuckle floating across my property line, when Brenda, our HOA president, storms across my dock. Her heels crunch against the weathered wood as she waves a certified letter like it's a weapon. "You're in violation. $2,000 fine." The paper feels rough against my wet fingers as I read it. My 8-year-old daughter Mia stops splashing, confusion written across her face. The metallic taste of rage fills my mouth as I realize this lunatic is trying to steal my lake, the one my grandfather bought in 1947, 30 years before her HOA even existed. But here's what Brenda didn't know about Tennessee property law. What would you do if your HOA Karen pulled this stunt? Drop it in the comments. Also, where are you watching from? I love seeing how these stories spread. Let me back up and tell you how this whole nightmare started. My name's Garrett Steinberg. I'm 44, mechanical engineer, recently divorced, and every other weekend I get the most important thing in my lifetime with my daughter Mia. This lake house isn't just property to me, it's salvation. My grandfather bought this land back in 1947 for $800. Can you believe that? $800 for 2.5 acres of Tennessee paradise with a natural spring-fed lake so clear you can count the bass swimming 20 feet down. The musty smell of his old tackle box still haunts my workshop, mixed with memories of Sunday morning fishing lessons and the satisfying plop of bobbers hitting glass-smooth water. When Grandpa passed, he left me something priceless, not just land, but legacy. I built that dock myself over 3 weekends, the sweet scent of cedar shavings mixing with lake air, while Mia helped by handing me the wrong screws. It's where she learned to cast, where we have our deepest conversations, where she asks those big life questions while minnows dart between the weathered posts. The property line extends 50 feet past the water line, something I learned during the divorce when lawyers made me survey everything. Back then, I didn't realize that boundary survey would become my most valuable weapon. Enter Brenda Kensington Walsh, stage right, like a villain from a bad community theater production. This woman moved here from Connecticut 2 years ago and immediately bought the biggest house in Willowbrook Estates, 4,800 square feet of suburban intimidation. White BMW that never has a speck of dirt, lawn so perfect it looks computer-generated, and the warm personality of a DMV clerk on their worst day. She became HOA president within 6 months by promising to elevate property values through rigorous standards enforcement. I should have recognized that political doublespeak. What she really meant was, "I'm going to make your lives miserable with my clipboard and God complex." Under sweet old Mr. Peterson, our monthly fees were $45, covered basic maintenance, holiday decorations, keeping the peace. Everyone was happy. Everyone was neighbors. Brenda cranked those fees up to $180 a month faster than you could say, power trip, claimed we needed professional management services. What we got was Brenda walking around with an actual ruler, measuring grass height like she was preparing for the lawn Olympics. She timed garage doors with a stopwatch. A stopwatch! The woman made the Gestapo look laid back. The Henderson family down the street got slapped with an $800 fine because their kids had a slip and slide during a heat wave. Mrs. Bennett, this sweet retired teacher who bakes snickerdoodles for the whole neighborhood, got cited for excessive garden decorations. Her crime? 3 garden gnomes. 3! I've seen gas stations with more lawn ornaments. I started researching HOA law after watching my neighbors get picked off one by one. Turns out property rights established before HOA formation legally can't be superseded by new covenants, something about grandfathered rights that protects original landowners. That little nugget would prove more valuable than gold. Then came the Saturday that changed everything. I'm teaching Mia how to cast near the lily pads, her little tongue poking out in concentration, when the sharp crack of designer heels on gravel shatters our peaceful morning. Brenda's marching down my driveway like she's leading a military parade, clipboard clutched like a shield, wearing that special expression reserved for people who've never been punched in the face. "Excuse me," she announces, her voice cutting through morning bird song like a chainsaw through silk. "I need to discuss a compliance issue." The warm sun suddenly feels cold on my wet shoulders. Mia looks up from her fishing rod, confusion clouding her 8-year-old features. "What's the problem, Brenda?" She flips through papers with surgical precision. "This lake is classified as a community water feature under HOA Covenant 47B. All recreational water activities require board approval." The absurdity hits me like a slap. Community water feature? Brenda, this is my property. My grandfather bought this land before your HOA was even a gleam in some developer's eye. Rules are rules, Mr. Steinberg. She hands me regulations printed on official-looking letterhead. Cease all swimming activities immediately and submit formal applications for recreational use permits. I show her my property survey, boundaries clearly marked in surveyor's ink that's older than she is. Brenda barely glances at it. I'm sure we can work something out through proper channels, but until then, she tears off a pink violation slip like she's issuing a parking ticket. Compliance or consequences. As her heels click away, leaving expensive perfume hanging in humid air, I realize I'm not dealing with a reasonable person. I'm dealing with someone who thinks power exists to feed ego, not serve community. Mia tugs my swim shorts. Daddy, why can't we swim in our own lake? That question would haunt me for weeks, but it also lit a fire that would burn Brenda's little empire to the ground. 1 week later, a certified letter arrived that made my blood pressure spike so hard I probably could have powered a small town. The return address read Willowbrook Estates HOA Legal Department, which was really just Brenda's kitchen table where she played judge, jury, and executioner. I tore open the envelope with shaking hands, the thick paper crackling like kindling about to catch fire. Violation notice, final demand. $2,000 for swimming in my own lake. But wait, it gets better. She'd itemized this thing like a restaurant bill from hell. Unauthorized recreational use of community water resources. $200, failure to obtain recreational activity permits. $500, contempt of HOA authority. $300, contempt of HOA authority. I didn't even know that was a thing you could be fined for. What's next? Breathing without a permit? Payment due in 14 days, or they'd pursue all available legal remedies. The metallic taste of rage filled my mouth as I read that threat. This woman was essentially trying to extort me for using my own property. I walked next door to check on Mrs. Bennett, who was deadheading her roses with the careful precision of a surgeon. The sweet smell of blooming jasmine couldn't mask the worry lines creasing her forehead. "They got you too, didn't they?" she whispered, glancing around like Brenda might be hiding in the bushes with her clipboard. Turns out, the Hendersons weren't the only victims. Mrs. Bennett had been slapped with a $400 fine for her unauthorized water feature, a bird bath her late husband installed in 1987. A bird bath! The woman was basically running a protection racket disguised as community management. She's targeting anyone who questions her, Mrs. Bennett continued, her voice barely audible over the buzz of cicadas. The pool contractor told me she demanded kickbacks for approving installation permits. When he refused, she banned him from the neighborhood. That night, I did what any rational engineer would do. I researched the hell out of property law. 3 cups of coffee, and 4 hours later, I discovered something beautiful. Tennessee state law explicitly protects property rights established before HOA formation. It's called the Grandfather Clause, and it's ironclad. Here's what most people don't know about HOAs. They can't retroactively claim ownership of private property, no matter what their fancy covenants say. The law protects original landowners from exactly this kind of hostile takeover. I printed out the relevant statutes, highlighted the key sections, and crafted a response that would make any lawyer proud. Certified mail, return receipt requested, formal legal language that basically said, "Nice try, but you're wrong, and here's why." My letter was a masterpiece of polite legal destruction. I cited Tennessee Code Annotated Section 6627-403, which clearly states that property rights predating covenant formation remain in full effect. I attached my grandfather's original deed, my current survey, and enough legal precedent to choke a courthouse. The mini twist came 3 days later. Instead of backing down like any reasonable person would, Brenda doubled down with the fury of a woman who'd never been told no in her entire privileged life. She sent another certified letter claiming my dock was an unpermitted structure that posed significant safety hazards to the community. The woman was now threatening to have the county condemn my dock, the same dock that had passed every inspection when I built it, the same dock that was older than some of the houses in this neighborhood. But here's where Brenda made her first real mistake. She'd been calling county inspectors about various neighbors so frequently that I decided to pay them a visit myself. The scratchy-faced inspector who'd been fielding her calls looked exhausted just hearing her name. "That woman," he said, shaking his head while coffee steam rose from his mug, "has filed 47 complaints in 8 months. 47. Most inspectors see that many in a year. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Between you and me, we're considering harassment charges if she keeps this up. Nobody's got time for this nonsense. I learned that Brenda had reported Mrs. Bennett's garden gnomes as structural hazards, the Henderson swing set as an unapproved recreational facility, and someone's fence post as being potentially 3 inches over the property line. She'd become the neighborhood's self-appointed enforcement officer, armed with measuring tape and an ego the size of Texas. The inspector agreed to come check my dock, mostly to get Brenda off his back. 20 minutes later, he handed me a clean bill of health and a piece of advice. Document everything. This lady's building a pattern, and patterns have a way of coming back to bite people. That evening, I started a file. Every interaction, every letter, every witness statement from neighbors who'd been harassed. I didn't know it yet, but I was building the foundation for Brenda's downfall, one documented abuse at a time. The sound of Mia's laughter echoed across the water as she practiced casting from our perfectly legal, fully inspected dock. Somewhere in her kitchen command center, Brenda was probably plotting her next move. Let her come. I was ready. If I thought Brenda would back down after getting legally schooled, I clearly underestimated the depths of her delusion. 2 weeks later, she escalated to nuclear warfare. She brought in her secret weapon, her brother-in-law's law firm. The letterhead was impressive, all gold embossing and intimidating font that screamed, "We bill $400 per hour to write threatening letters." The legal demand claimed my swimming created significant liability exposure for the Homeowners Association and demanded I cease all lake activities during their comprehensive safety investigation. They were seeking a temporary injunction to prevent any water access while they determined if my private lake somehow endangered the community. But Brenda wasn't content with legal intimidation. Oh no. She launched a full-scale character assassination campaign that would make politicians blush. First came the Facebook posts. Brenda created a community safety page where she shared concerns about potential water contamination from unregulated private recreational activities. She posted grainy photos of my lake with ominous captions like, "What lurks beneath?" and "Is our community at risk?" The woman had the audacity to suggest my pristine spring-fed lake might harbor dangerous bacteria that could somehow migrate to affect the entire neighborhood. Never mind that my lake was upstream from everything and completely self-contained. Then she started the whisper campaign. Mrs. Bennett reported overhearing Brenda at the grocery store, telling anyone who'd listen that my dock was an environmental hazard affecting neighborhood drainage patterns. The Henderson family stopped waving when I drove past. Brenda had convinced them I was some kind of ecological terrorist. The smell of paranoia was thicker than the humid August air. 3 more neighbors received surprise architectural violation notices for increasingly ridiculous infractions. The Martinez family got cited for their mailbox being non-standard height. The Johnsons were fined for having a vegetable garden that was supposedly incompatible with neighborhood aesthetic standards. Brenda was systematically terrorizing anyone who might support me, creating a climate of fear where neighbors were afraid to even make eye contact. But here's where her arrogance became my opportunity. I hired Aquatest Environmental Services to conduct a comprehensive water quality analysis. Cost me $300, but it was worth every penny for the ammunition it provided. When the results came back, I actually laughed out loud reading them. My lake water was cleaner than what comes out of most people's taps. pH perfectly balanced, 0 harmful bacteria, mineral content that bottled water companies would kill for. The environmental engineer who conducted the test called it pristine natural habitat with exceptional water quality. Meanwhile, I'd been doing some digging of my own into Brenda's background. Turns out our queen of community standards had quite the history. She'd been forced to resign from her previous HOA presidency in Connecticut after what the local newspaper diplomatically called governance irregularities. Online reviews of her real estate business painted a picture of someone who used high-pressure tactics and legal threats to intimidate clients. One review mentioned her aggressive approach to commission disputes and tendency to involve family legal connections inappropriately. Her brother-in-law's law firm had an interesting specialty, too. They seemed to make a living filing frivolous HOA enforcement cases. I found court records showing they'd lost more cases than they'd won, usually due to what judges called insufficient legal foundation and harassment litigation. The mini-twist came when the county inspector made his promised visit. I was expecting a routine dock examination, but what happened next was pure gold. Inspector Rodriguez climbed out of his truck looking like a man who'd seen too much HOA drama for one lifetime. His weathered hands shook mine with the firm grip of someone who appreciated honest dealing. "Let me guess," he said, eyeing my perfectly maintained dock. "Brenda Kensington Walsh called this in?" When I nodded, he actually chuckled. "That woman has filed 47 complaints in 8 months. 47. My supervisor told me if she calls one more time about trivial nonsense, we're filing harassment charges." The inspection took 20 minutes. My dock not only met code, it exceeded requirements. The inspector noted the quality craftsmanship, proper permits, and structural integrity that would last decades. As he was packing up his equipment, Inspector Rodriguez shared something that made my day. "Between you and me, we've been tracking her complaint pattern. She's targeting specific residents while ignoring actual violations on properties belonging to her supporters. That's selective enforcement, and it's illegal as hell." He handed me his inspection report with a smile. "Your dock is safer than most commercial marinas. Anyone who says otherwise is either lying or doesn't know what they're talking about." That evening, I posted the water quality results and dock inspection report on the community Facebook page. The comments were immediate, and telling neighbors who'd been afraid to speak up suddenly found their voices. "If Garrett's Lake is contaminated, then my tap water must be toxic waste," wrote Mike Johnson. "Why are we paying $180 a month for professional management that consists of harassing homeowners with clean inspection reports?" asked Sarah Martinez. The tide was turning. Brenda's empire of fear was showing cracks, and I intended to drive a wrecking ball right through them. Brenda's response to my public vindication was swift, vicious, and absolutely predictable. She called an emergency HOA board meeting with exactly 24 hours notice, which is barely legal under Tennessee HOA law, but technically sufficient if you're desperate enough. The meeting notice arrived via email at 6:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, marked "Urgent Special Assessment Vote" in red letters that screamed panic. The agenda was simple and terrifying. Motion to implement immediate $5,000 special assessment per household to fund legal defense against frivolous challenges to community authority. $5,000 per household, because I dared to prove my lake was clean and my dock was safe. I showed up to that meeting in the community center with my folder of documentation, expecting a room full of angry neighbors. Instead, I found exactly 6 people. Brenda, her 2 remaining board allies, retired insurance adjuster Frank Pemberton, and her next-door neighbor Dorothy Walsh, plus 3 homeowners who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. The metallic smell of folding chairs and industrial carpet couldn't mask the tension in that sterile room. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps as Brenda called the meeting to order with the authority of someone who'd clearly lost touch with reality. "This emergency assessment," she announced, reading from prepared remarks, "is necessary to defend our community against a resident who believes rules don't apply to him. Legal expenses are mounting due to one individual's refusal to comply with reasonable regulations." I requested the floor under homeowner participation rules. Frank tried to deny me, but I'd done my homework. Robert's Rules of Order clearly state that any homeowner can address emergency assessment proposals. "I'd like to know," I said, standing slowly, "exactly which legal expenses we're talking about. Because the only legal letters I've seen came from your brother-in-law's firm demanding I stop using my own property." The crack in Brenda's composure was beautiful to watch. Her carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the flush creeping up her neck as she shuffled through papers with increasing desperation. "The board has determined that ongoing litigation threatens community stability," Dorothy chimed in, reading directly from what was obviously a script. "This assessment ensures adequate legal representation." That's when I dropped my first bomb. "Litigation? You mean the harassment campaign that's already cost this community credibility with county inspectors? I spoke with Inspector Rodriguez yesterday. He's considering filing official harassment charges if the frivolous complaints continue." The 3 non-board homeowners suddenly looked very interested. One of them, a young father I recognized from school pickup, leaned forward with the expression of someone who'd been waiting for this moment. "Hold up," he said. "Are you telling us we're being charged $5,000 because Brenda's been filing bogus complaints?" Brenda's voice rose an octave. "That's a malicious mischaracterization." "Is it?" I pulled out Inspector Rodriguez's written statement. "Because I've got documentation showing 47 complaints filed in 8 months, with 0 valid violations found. The county considers this a pattern of abuse." The mini twist came when Frank Pemberton, Brenda's most loyal supporter, suddenly looked very uncomfortable. As a retired insurance adjuster, he understood liability better than most. The idea of the HOA being sued for harassment was making him sweat through his polyester golf shirt. "Brenda," he said quietly, "maybe we should table this assessment until we get more information about our legal exposure." That's when Brenda completely lost it. "Legal exposure?" she shrieked, abandoning all pretense of parliamentary procedure. "I've been protecting this community from a rogue element who thinks his grandfather's deed gives him the right to ignore modern safety standards." The young father stood up. "Lady, you just tried to charge us $5,000 because a guy swims in his own lake. My wife and I are already struggling with the $135 increase you pushed through last year." "And what exactly did that increase pay for?" asked the third homeowner, an elderly woman I didn't recognize. "Because my street still has the same potholes it had 2 years ago." I'd been researching HOA finances, and what I'd discovered was fascinating. Under Tennessee law, homeowners have the right to inspect detailed financial records within 30 days of a written request. Most people don't know this, but HOA boards are legally required to provide complete transparency about how dues are spent. "That's an excellent question," I said, savoring the moment. "In fact, I formally request access to all HOA financial records for the past 2 years. Tennessee code requires you to provide them within 30 days. The color drained from Brenda's face faster than water down a bathtub drain. Frank started shuffling papers nervously. Dorothy looked like she was calculating escape routes. That information is confidential during ongoing legal proceedings," Brenda stammered. "Actually," I replied, pulling out my printed statute, "Tennessee law makes no exception for ongoing legal proceedings when it comes to HOA financial transparency. Homeowners have absolute right to examine how their money is spent." The room fell silent except for the persistent buzz of fluorescent lights and the distant hum of the building's air conditioning. You could practically hear the wheels turning in everyone's heads as they realized what I was really asking for. The special assessment vote failed 3-3, with Frank abstaining. But more importantly, I'd just lit a fuse that would expose everything. 30 days to produce financial records. I had a feeling those 30 days were going to be very interesting. 28 days later, a manila envelope arrived that would change everything. I'd been expecting resistance, delays, maybe even outright refusal to provide the financial records. What I got instead was a stack of documents so damning that I had to read them twice to believe what I was seeing. The first red flag was obvious. Under the previous HOA president, our annual operating budget was $25,200 for 47 homes. Basic maintenance, holiday decorations, quarterly newsletters, simple and transparent. Under Brenda's professional management, that budget had exploded to $101,600 annually. But here's where it gets interesting. I couldn't find any evidence of the improvements that justified a 300% increase in spending. I spread the documents across my kitchen table, the musty smell of photocopied paper mixing with coffee as I dove into 2 years of financial records. What I discovered was a masterclass in creative theft. Brenda's management company, Willowbrook Property Solutions LLC, was billing $3,400 per month for comprehensive community management services. That's $40,800 annually, which would be reasonable if they were actually providing comprehensive services. But when I cross-referenced the work orders, most of the services were phantom. Lawn maintenance supposedly cost $2,800 monthly, but I'd seen the same crew that charged the previous board $400. Pool maintenance, and we only have one small community pool, was billed at $900 monthly through AquaCare Professional Services. A quick internet search revealed that AquaCare's business address was the same as Brenda's house. Then I found the real smoking gun. Legal fees. Oh, the legal fees were beautiful in their audacity. Brenda's brother-in-law's firm had billed the HOA $18,400 in regulatory compliance and enforcement actions over 18 months. But when I examined the detailed invoices, half of those charges were for his personal legal matters that had nothing to do with the HOA. I found billing entries for consultation regarding residential real estate transaction dispute. That was Brenda's own house purchase. Contract review for commercial property acquisition, her husband's failed restaurant investment. Family law consultation regarding custody modifications, I didn't even want to know. The pattern was breathtakingly brazen. Every month, Brenda's family businesses would submit inflated invoices to the HOA, which she would approve as board president, essentially laundering homeowner dues through her personal accounts. But the piece de resistance was a $4,200 charge for emergency community safety consultation, dated exactly 1 week after my first lake fine. They'd literally billed the community for the cost of harassing me. I called Mrs. Bennett, who came over with her own set of records. She'd been keeping meticulous notes since Brenda took power, old teacher habits dying hard. The bitter taste of betrayal filled my mouth as we compared her observations with the financial evidence. "I knew something was wrong," she whispered, running her finger down expense reports. She kept talking about all these improvements, but I never saw any workers except the same lawn crew we've always had. The math was staggering. In 2 years, Brenda had diverted approximately $147,000 in homeowner dues to her family businesses through inflated contracts and fraudulent billing. That's over $300 per household money that should have gone toward actual community improvements. I remembered something my grandfather used to say: "Son, when someone's stealing from you, they'll always tell you it's for your own good." Brenda hadn't just been power-tripping with her ridiculous enforcement. She'd been systematically looting our community while hiding behind a facade of professional management. The financial records also revealed why she'd been so desperate to silence opposition. Anyone asking questions about dues increases might start looking at where that money actually went. My lake fine wasn't about HOA compliance. It was about keeping the cash cow quiet. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the evidence spread across my table. What started as a property rights dispute had uncovered a sophisticated embezzlement scheme. Brenda wasn't just a power-hungry HOA president, she was a criminal. And now I had proof. The next morning, I did what any rational person would do when they discover they're living in a criminal enterprise disguised as an HOA I called Mrs. Bennett. "We need to talk," I said. "Bring your notebook and maybe a strong cup of coffee. You're not going to believe what I found." An hour later, my kitchen table looked like a detective's evidence board. Financial records spread across every surface, Mrs. Bennett's meticulous notes providing the timeline, and my laptop displaying Tennessee fraud statutes that made for fascinating reading. Mrs. Bennett's weathered hands trembled slightly as she flipped through invoice after invoice of fabricated charges. "My Harold fought in Korea," she said quietly. "He used to say the worst enemies were the ones who smiled while they robbed you blind." That afternoon, I made 3 crucial phone calls. First, I contacted Jackson & Associates, a law firm specializing in HOA fraud cases. Attorney Sarah Jackson had seen this pattern before board members using their positions to funnel community funds into personal businesses. She explained that Tennessee has strong whistleblower protections for residents who expose HOA corruption, and what I'd uncovered definitely qualified as criminal embezzlement. "Here's what most people don't know about HOA fraud," she said, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who'd fought these battles before. "Board members have what's called fiduciary duty. They're legally required to act in the community's best interest, not their own financial benefit. When they violate that trust, it's not just civil liability, it's criminal fraud." Second call went to the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance, which oversees HOA compliance. Turns out they'd been waiting for someone to file a formal complaint about Willowbrook Estates. We weren't the first community where Brenda's management style had raised red flags. The third call was to my accountant, who recommended a forensic financial analyst. Within 2 days, I had professional documentation proving that Brenda's management company was billing at rates 340% above industry standards for services that were either substandard or completely fictional. By the end of the week, my kitchen had become mission control for what Mrs. Bennett dubbed Operation Clipboard Takedown. The Henderson family joined our growing alliance, bringing their social media expertise and a burning desire for revenge over that $800 slip-and-slide fine. Mike Henderson turned out to be a graphic designer who could create presentations that would make corporate executives weep with envy. "We need to document everything," Sarah Henderson said, her laptop already buzzing with activity. "Timeline, financial evidence, witness statements, the whole package." Our secret meetings rotated between houses to avoid suspicion. Tuesday nights at the Bennetts, Thursday afternoons at the Hendersons, weekend planning sessions at my place while Mia played with the Henderson kids. The sweet smell of Mrs. Bennett's homemade cookies became our unofficial planning fuel. We established a private Facebook group called Willowbrook Truth, password protected and invitation only. Within days, we had 15 households sharing their own harassment stories and documentation. The Martinez family contributed photos of their perfectly reasonable mailbox that Brenda had somehow deemed non-compliant. The Johnsons shared email records of threats over their vegetable garden. I reached out to the pool contractor who'd been blacklisted for refusing Brenda's kickback demands. Tom Rodriguez agreed to provide written testimony about her attempted extortion scheme. His weathered face showed the kind of quiet dignity that comes from doing honest work in a dishonest world. "That woman tried to shake me down for 15% of every job in the neighborhood," he said, handing me a folder of documented communications. "When I told her to stuff it, she banned me and spread lies about my work quality." Meanwhile, I'd been studying Tennessee's annual HOA meeting requirements like I was preparing for the bar exam. State law mandates that all homeowners have the right to participate in annual meetings, and boards cannot prevent discussion of financial matters or governance issues. Robert's Rules of Order govern procedural disputes, which meant I needed to understand parliamentary tactics better than Brenda did. The timing was perfect. Our annual meeting was scheduled for 6 weeks out, with mandatory attendance required by covenant. Every homeowner would be in one room, which created the perfect opportunity for maximum impact revelation. Mrs. Bennett had been researching Brenda's Connecticut background and discovered newspaper archives from her previous HOA scandal. Apparently, she'd been forced to resign after homeowners discovered inflated management contracts with her family businesses. The pattern was identical. She was running the same scam in a different state. Our communication strategy was simple: document everything, coordinate timing for maximum impact, and prepare for Brenda's inevitable retaliation attempts. Sarah Jackson had warned us that cornered embezzlers often escalate to desperate measures, including vandalism, harassment, and frivolous counter-lawsuits. I installed security cameras around my property after spotting an unfamiliar car parked outside my house 3 nights running. The grainy footage showed someone walking around my dock at 2 a.m., though I couldn't make out details in the darkness. "She knows something's coming," Mike Henderson observed during one of our planning sessions. "Question is, how far will she go to protect her little empire?" We were about to find out. Brenda's counterattack came like a tornado touching down in suburbia, swift, destructive, and completely predictable if you understood the psychology of cornered criminals. It started with my dock. I woke up Monday morning to find 3 of the support cables severed, deck boards loosened, and my ladder mysteriously missing 2 bolts. The smell of fresh wood shavings mixed with lake water told me this wasn't weather damage. Someone had deliberately sabotaged my property with surgical precision. My new security cameras had captured everything. A figure in dark clothing and a baseball cap had spent 47 minutes systematically damaging my dock at 2:30 a.m. The footage was grainy, but the body language screamed middle-aged woman trying to look like a teenage vandal. I filed a police report immediately. Deputy Martinez examined the damage with the weary expression of someone who'd seen too much suburban drama. "Deliberate sabotage," he confirmed, photographing the severed cables. "Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't random vandalism, it was targeted harassment." While I was dealing with dock repairs, Brenda launched Phase 2 of her desperate campaign. Mrs. Bennett received a violation notice for her unauthorized agricultural facility, also known as the tomato plants she'd been growing in the same spot for 15 years. The Henderson family got hit with an emergency architectural review because their mailbox was supposedly the wrong shade of black. Not kidding, she claimed their mailbox was charcoal instead of midnight, which violated some covenant nobody had ever heard of. But the crown jewel of her retaliation came Tuesday afternoon, when a process server knocked on my door with a restraining order petition. According to Brenda's sworn affidavit, I had been harassing and intimidating her through aggressive confrontations and public defamation. The woman had actually claimed she feared for her safety because I dared to post water quality test results on Facebook. Her brother-in-law's law firm had outdone themselves with this legal fiction. They'd taken every instance of me defending my property rights and twisted it into a narrative of stalking and harassment. My request for financial records became invasive surveillance of private business operations. My attendance at HOA meetings was characterized as disruptive and threatening behavior. I called Sarah Jackson immediately, my hands still shaking from reading the restraining order petition. "This is classic Darvo," she explained. "Deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. When criminals get exposed, they always claim they're the real victims. But here's the beautiful part. She just created a paper trail of her own desperation. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for the following week, which meant Brenda was trying to silence me before the annual HOA meeting. She wanted me legally prevented from attending the very meeting where I planned to expose her embezzlement scheme. But Wednesday night brought the most audacious move yet. I was reviewing financial documents in my kitchen when my doorbell rang at 9:47 p.m. I found Brenda standing on my porch wearing designer athleisure and the kind of fake smile that politicians use during corruption scandals. "Garrett," she said, her voice dripping with manufactured warmth, "I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot." The smell of her expensive perfume couldn't mask the desperation radiating from her like heat from asphalt. She'd come to offer me a deal. "All this legal unpleasantness could disappear," she continued, glancing around nervously. "I'm authorized to waive all outstanding fines and even reduce your monthly dues. We could work together instead of against each other." The bribery attempt was so clumsy it was almost insulting. She was literally standing on my porch, offering financial incentives to drop my investigation into her financial crimes. "What exactly are you proposing, Brenda?" Her eyes lit up like she thought she had me hooked. "Join the inner circle. Preferential treatment, advance notice of any potential violations, input on community decisions. We take care of our friends, Garrett." I let her dig the hole deeper while my security cameras recorded every word. She actually outlined a two-tiered system where her supporters received special privileges while everyone else lived under constant threat of harassment. And if I refuse, the mask slipped completely. Then you'll find out exactly how difficult life can become for residents who don't appreciate community cooperation. After she left, I immediately called Deputy Martinez to report the attempted bribery. Offering financial incentives to drop investigation into potential crimes isn't just unethical, it's witness tampering, which is a felony in Tennessee. The next morning brought more vandalism reports. Someone had spray-painted "snitch" on the Martinez family's garage door. Anonymous flyers appeared in mailboxes warning about disruptive residents who threatened community harmony. The Henderson sprinkler system had been mysteriously damaged overnight. But the intimidation campaign was backfiring spectacularly. Instead of frightening people into silence, Brenda's escalating desperation was waking up neighbors who'd been afraid to speak out. Our private Facebook group had grown to 23 households, all sharing stories of harassment and documenting the reign of terror. Mrs. Bennett summed it up perfectly during our Thursday planning session. "She's not acting like someone who's innocent. She's acting like someone who knows she's going to prison." The annual meeting was 3 weeks away. Brenda was circling the wagons, but she'd forgotten something crucial. We weren't the ones with anything to hide. With 2 weeks until the annual meeting, Brenda played her nuclear option. She called an emergency board meeting with exactly 24 hours' notice and proposed something so outrageous it took my breath away: a $15,000 lien on my property. The certified letter arrived on a Friday afternoon, the thick paper trembling in my hands as I read the justification. According to Brenda's emergency motion, my ongoing litigation expenses and community disruption required immediate financial remedy through property encumbrance, $15,000, on my house, for the crime of exposing her embezzlement scheme. But wait, it gets better. The motion included a timeline for foreclosure proceedings if the lien remained unpaid after 60 days. This woman was literally trying to steal my house to cover up stealing from the HOA. Saturday morning brought the most sophisticated smear campaign yet. Professional-looking flyers appeared on every doorstep, complete with glossy photos and corporate-style layout that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payments. "Protecting our community from dangerous individuals," screamed the headline, above a photo of my house that had been deliberately darkened to look sinister. The text described me as a disruptive resident with a history of aggressive confrontations who posed ongoing safety risks to families and children. They'd even photoshopped images of my property to make it look neglected. My pristine lawn appeared overgrown, my dock looked rotted, and they'd somehow made my lake water appear murky and contaminated. The production value was so high that if I didn't know better, I might have believed it myself. The flyers included testimonials from concerned neighbors describing my threatening behavior and intimidation tactics. Problem was, I recognized some of the quoted residents. They were Brenda's supporters who lived 3 streets over and had never spoken to me in their lives. Sunday brought anonymous social media accounts flooding community pages with false information. Garrett Threat 2024 posted doctored screenshots of threatening messages supposedly from my accounts. Concerned Mom WB shared fabricated stories about me stalking children near the community pool. The digital assassination was so coordinated it had to be professionally managed. Someone was spending serious money to destroy my reputation before the annual meeting. But Brenda's masterstroke came Monday morning when she attempted to freeze the HOA's bank accounts. Her brother-in-law filed an emergency motion claiming that ongoing investigations by hostile residents created fiduciary risk requiring immediate asset protection. They wanted a judge to prevent anyone from accessing financial records or conducting further audits until their fabricated litigation was resolved. I called Sarah Jackson immediately, my voice cracking with exhaustion and rage. "She's trying to destroy evidence," Sarah explained. "Freezing assets prevents forensic accounting and gives her time to manufacture false documentation." But here's the thing. This motion proves she knows she's guilty. Innocent people don't try to hide financial records. Tuesday brought Brenda's final gambit, delivered with the theatrical flair of someone who'd watched too many legal dramas. She called another emergency meeting, this time threatening to dissolve the entire HOA unless residents returned to cooperative governance principles. Her ultimatum was breathtakingly manipulative: submit to her authority or watch property values crash when deed restrictions disappeared. Without proper HOA oversight, she announced in an email to all residents, this community will become subject to unrestricted development. Commercial businesses, multifamily housing, industrial facilities, anything becomes possible without covenant protection. The threat was real. Dissolving an HOA eliminates all deed restrictions, which could theoretically allow someone to open a gas station next to your house. She was holding the entire community hostage to protect her criminal enterprise. Wednesday night, she escalated to what I can only describe as pure evil. Mrs. Bennett called me at 11:30 p.m., sobbing so hard I could barely understand her words. Someone had approached her 14-year-old grandson Tyler at school, warning him that his grandmother was involved with dangerous people and might get hurt if she didn't stop causing trouble. They'd threatened a child, a 14-year-old kid whose only crime was having a grandmother brave enough to stand up to a criminal. I drove to Mrs. Bennett's house immediately, finding her sitting in her kitchen with shaking hands wrapped around a cold cup of tea. The smell of jasmine couldn't mask the fear radiating from this woman who'd survived the Korean War but was being terrorized by a suburban sociopath. "They know where Tyler goes to school," she whispered. "They know his schedule, his friends. How could anyone threaten a child over HOA politics?" I called Deputy Martinez, who took the threat seriously enough to assign extra patrol coverage to Tyler's school. Threatening minors crosses every line. This wasn't HOA harassment anymore. It was criminal intimidation with potential federal implications. But something beautiful happened Thursday morning. Instead of scaring our coalition into silence, the threat against Tyler galvanized the entire community. Parents who'd been neutral suddenly understood they were dealing with someone capable of targeting children. Our private Facebook group exploded to 37 households overnight. Families who'd never spoken to each other were sharing contact information and coordinating protection strategies. The Martinez family organized informal neighborhood watch patrols. The Johnsons started a group text for reporting suspicious activity. Brenda had finally gone too far. In her desperation to protect her embezzlement scheme, she'd transformed herself from a power-hungry HOA president into a legitimate threat to community safety. The annual meeting was 6 days away. Time to end this. The Willowbrook Estates annual HOA meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. on a Thursday in the community center. By 6:45, the parking lot looked like Black Friday at Best Buy, every space filled, neighbors walking in from 3 blocks away, the electric tension of a community ready for justice. 43 of our 47 households showed up, the largest turnout in HOA history. I arrived with my laptop bag full of evidence, Sarah Jackson at my side, and a camera crew from Channel 7 News positioned discreetly in the back corner. Investigative reporter Amanda Walsh had been following our story for 2 weeks, and tonight she'd get the exclusive footage of suburban justice in action. Brenda entered at exactly 7 p.m. wearing a Navy business suit and the kind of practiced smile that politicians use during scandals. Her brother-in-law attorney trailed behind, looking like a man who'd realized he was about to witness a legal train wreck. Deputy Martinez stood near the door, officially present for security purposes, but actually carrying arrest warrants that had been signed that afternoon. The district attorney's office had moved faster than anyone expected once they reviewed our evidence package. "I call this meeting to order," Brenda announced, rapping her gavel like she was conducting a corporate board meeting instead of facing a room full of people she'd been systematically robbing. She tried to rush through the standard agenda, but I stood and requested recognition under homeowner participation rules. "The chair recognizes Mr. Steinberg," she said through gritted teeth, probably hoping I'd forgotten about her attempted bribery and property lien threats. I walked to the front of the room, connected my laptop to the projection screen, and watched 43 sets of eyes focus on the financial evidence that would destroy her. 2 years ago, we were paying $45 a month in HOA dues, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room. Today, we pay $180. I want to show you exactly where that extra money went. The first slide showed side-by-side budget comparisons. Gasps echoed through the room as neighbors saw the 300% spending increase with zero visible improvements. Brenda's management company charged us $40,000 annually for services the previous board handled for $8,000, I continued, clicking to the next slide. Her brother-in-law's law firm billed us $18,000 for legal work, including his personal divorce proceedings. The room erupted in angry murmurs. Someone shouted, "Are you kidding me?" Mrs. Bennett stood up, her small frame radiating righteous fury. Brenda tried to interrupt. "These allegations are—" "Let him finish," yelled Mike Henderson from the back row. The crowd agreed with a thunderous chorus of support. I clicked to the smoking gun slide, a detailed breakdown of embezzled funds totaling $187,000 over 26 months. Pool maintenance supposedly costs $900 monthly through a company registered to Brenda's home address. Lawn care inflated from $400 to $1,800 with the same crew doing identical work. Emergency safety consultations that were actually harassment campaigns against residents who asked questions. The projection screen showed bank routing numbers, inflated invoices, and phantom billing for services never rendered. Every dollar stolen from hardworking families, itemized and documented with forensic precision. "She didn't just steal our money," I said, my voice rising with controlled anger. "She terrorized anyone who dared to question her authority. She threatened children. She vandalized property. She turned our community into her personal ATM machine." Brenda finally snapped, abandoning all pretense of parliamentary procedure. "This is a malicious conspiracy by a disgruntled resident who refuses to follow community standards," she shrieked, her carefully composed facade cracking like thin ice. "I've devoted 2 years to improving this neighborhood." "By stealing from us?" Mrs. Bennett's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "By threatening my grandson?" That's when Deputy Martinez stepped forward, his badge glinting under fluorescent lights as the room fell deadly silent. "Brenda Kensington Walsh, you're under arrest for embezzlement, mail fraud, and witness intimidation." The metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the community center as 43 neighbors watched justice unfold in real time. Amanda Walsh's camera captured every second as Brenda's empire collapsed in spectacular fashion. "You have the right to remain silent." Her brother-in-law attorney was backing toward the exit, mumbling about conflicts of interest and needing to call his own lawyer. Frank Pemberton sat frozen in his chair, probably calculating his own legal exposure. As Deputy Martinez led Brenda away in handcuffs, she turned back to the crowd with pure venom in her eyes. "You'll regret this. Property values will crash. This community will fall apart without proper management." Mrs. Bennett stood up slowly, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd survived real hardship. "Honey," she said with devastating calm, "we just watched you steal nearly $200,000 from working families. The only thing falling apart here is your criminal enterprise." The room exploded in applause as Brenda disappeared through the exit doors. Her reign of terror finally ended. But we weren't done yet. We had a community to rebuild. Sarah Henderson immediately nominated Mrs. Bennett as interim president. Unanimous approval. Mike Henderson volunteered for the Financial Oversight Committee. I accepted the position of compliance coordinator with one simple mandate: transparent governance and zero tolerance for abuse. Within an hour, we'd voted to reduce monthly dues to $35 lower than the original $45 because we'd eliminated all the fraudulent expenses. We established monthly financial transparency reports, democratic decision-making processes, and a community fund for recovering stolen assets. The taste of victory was sweeter than Mrs. Bennett's homemade cookies. 6 months later, Brenda Kensington Walsh was sentenced to 3 years in state prison and ordered to pay $200,000 in restitution. Her brother-in-law got 18 months for conspiracy and was permanently disbarred. The judge called it a systematic betrayal of community trust for personal financial gain. But the real victory wasn't watching Brenda in an orange jumpsuit. It was what happened to our neighborhood afterward. We recovered $175,000 through asset seizure and civil litigation. Instead of just refunding the money, our new democratically elected board did something beautiful with those recovered funds. We established the Willowbrook Community Foundation, dedicated to making our neighborhood a place where families actually want to live. The foundation's first project was a college scholarship fund for local high school students. Every year, we award $5,000 scholarships to kids who demonstrate community service and academic achievement. Last month, we presented our 3rd annual scholarship to Tyler Bennett, Mrs. Bennett's grandson, who'd been threatened by Brenda's associates. He's headed to Tennessee Tech to study engineering, inspired by watching his grandmother stand up to corruption. My lake became the heart of our transformed community, but not in the way Brenda had feared. With proper liability insurance funded by recovered assets, we opened it for supervised community swimming during summer months. The sound of children's laughter echoing across water where I'd once been fined for existing, that's what victory sounds like. We built a proper community dock using funds that should have been stolen by inflated contractor bills. Every 4th of July, we host the Freedom from Tyranny barbecue, where neighbors who'd been afraid to make eye contact now organize potluck competitions and kids' fishing derbies. Property values increased 12% within the first year. Turns out transparent, honest governance is incredibly attractive to homebuyers. We actually have a waiting list of families wanting to move into our model HOA community, which was featured in Property Management Today as an example of democratic reform. Mrs. Bennett became our permanent president, running unopposed for 3 consecutive terms. Her monthly meetings feel more like neighborhood block parties, complete with her legendary snickerdoodles and genuine community problem-solving. We still have rules, but they serve residents instead of terrorizing them. The Henderson family spearheaded our environmental conservation project, turning the recovered embezzlement funds into native plant restoration around the lake. Sarah Henderson's social media expertise helped us create a community app where neighbors share resources, organize carpools, and coordinate everything from babysitting to snow removal. My personal transformation surprised everyone, including myself. Turns out, fighting corruption teaches you skills you never knew you had. I've been consulted as an expert witness in 4 similar HOA fraud cases across Tennessee, helping other communities expose board member embezzlement schemes. The Tennessee State Legislature passed the Willowbrook reforms last year, new laws requiring annual financial audits for HOAs with budgets over $50,000 and criminal background checks for board candidates. Our nightmare became the catalyst for statewide homeowner protection. 3 weeks ago, I got a call from a desperate homeowner in Florida. Similar pattern dramatic fee increases, family business contracts, harassment of questioning residents. "We've heard what you did in Tennessee," she said. "Can you help us?" But that's a story for another video. Here's what I learned from this whole experience. Knowledge is power, documentation is ammunition, and community solidarity can defeat any tyrant. Brenda thought she could intimidate us into silence, but she underestimated the power of neighbors working together for justice. If you're dealing with HOA corruption, remember these key points. Always verify financial records when dues increase dramatically. Document every interaction for legal protection, and build alliances with like-minded neighbors. Most importantly, don't let fear keep you silent. Criminals count on good people doing nothing. Today, Mia and I still swim in our lake every weekend she's with me. The water tastes like freedom, sounds like laughter, and smells like the honeysuckle that's been growing on these banks since my grandfather first cast a line here in 1947. Sometimes justice takes time, but it's always worth the fight. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment about your worst HOA nightmare. Trust me, you're not alone in dealing with power-hungry board members who've forgotten they work for the community, not the other way around. And if this story inspired you to stand up to corruption in your own neighborhood, smash that subscribe button because I've got 3 more HOA revenge stories that'll blow your mind. Next week, how I got my nosy HOA president fired for installing spy cameras in common areas. Until then, keep fighting the good fight and remember your property rights matter more than anyone's clipboard.